Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another outstanding Talks at Google speech. We are thrilled and honored to have Chef Daniel Boulud here today from New York. From his time at Le Cercle to his current work with the Bocuse d'Or team and his entire portfolio of restaurants, Daniel has really been advancing French cuisine and also incorporating American tastes and ingredients into the mix. And so he's here today speaking to us about his new book called Daniel, My French Cuisine. And it chronicles about 75 of his favorite dishes, some from the restaurants, some from France itself. And so he'll be talking to us about that in more detail today. And we do have a microphone at the end for questions. So please join me in welcoming Daniel to Google. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I got the mic. Good afternoon, everybody. So how many of you are good cook? Good chef. Yeah, a few. But no, thank you. I had a wonderful lunch here, by the way. And it seemed like you are the luckiest people on earth. Not only you're in California, but you have an amazing chef also I tasted your pumpkin soup in one, and then I finished my lunch with which cafeteria was it? Which restaurant? Hangout. Yeah, exactly. So fantastic. Well, cooking, it's of course something you learn early often. I learned it at 14, but I knew that I wanted to be a cook when I was about 10 to 12. I was born and raised on a farm, and today every chef dreams to be a farmer chef. It's farm to table, it's directly garden to table as close as possible. And we have seen model of that growing, and I think it's fantastic. I don't have my farm yet, but I do remember the one I had in France, where we grew everything, all kind of vegetables. We also had livestock, cows and goats, 40 goats, and making goat cheese, pigs and rabbit and turkey and geese and squab and chicken and duck. And every week we will go to the farmer's market and bring all the harvest we had that particular week. And and it teaches you certainly about how humble and how important it is about life ingredient. And when you're a chef, I think is the most important things you hang on and the most important things you fight for. And certainly the most important things we need almost a trust to have access to. And that's growing up on the farm when I wanted to be a cook, my parents and some friends helped me to get in one of the best restaurants in Lyon. So I started in Lyon at 14, and 2-star restaurant, fantastic. And Lyon is kind of the mecca of chef in France. And I right away knew that I was entering a very, very special club, a very special society, a real community of people who share the same passion and have the same ambition, but yet it was at the local level of Lyon, except for one man, Paul Bocuse, who was the chef who was starting to travel the world and taking the cuisine of Lyon to Rio de Janeiro, to Tokyo, to California at Mondavi. Robert Mondavi was the first one who brought French chef to California and make them cook and do demonstration there in Napa Valley. And so now we're in the early 70s, and really French cuisine is changing, and I'm this young chef. So I decided to work for some of the best chefs in France. For me, it was very important to choose someone who had the same fundamental as the one I started to work with, and also someone who had 3 Michelin star, because I felt then I had a start at a 2 Michelin star, and I wanted to know more about the 3 Michelin star restaurant, but I felt strong with the 2-star background because I learned a lot during that time. And so I went and I did my Tour de France, what we call the Tour de France, where you have to, I wanted to work in the south. So I went to Provence and I went to Moulin de Mougins in Cannes. It just had 3 star that year. It was very exhilarating. I mean, the energy, the talent who is gathering around you, because of course he receives so many resumes and he can be a little selective. And then after I moved to the southwest of France, to Michel Guérard, I moved to Burgundy in the Rhône, in Burgundy region with Georges Blanc. And then I left France. I went to Denmark, and in 80, I came to America because I wanted to be like them. I wanted to travel. They seem to have the good time when they travel. And they also seem to bring ideas. And all the traveling those chefs in the 70s were doing were really also, not only they were bringing their food and their culture to a country, but they were also bringing ideas. And I always loved, I wouldn't have been a chef if I didn't want to travel and be able to discover where else can we cook and what else there is out there. And so came to Washington, D.C., and did 2 years in D.C. as a private chef in a residence for an ambassador. And that was kind of a very cushy job, not too fascinating, but I had a chance to really go to the market every day there in D.C., having small suppliers. Because I was not cooking for a large amount of people, I was depending on small suppliers. And that was already the beginning of having local farmers there and local supplier. And there was a great chef there also, Jean-Louis Paladin, who had a restaurant at the Watergate, in the basement of the Watergate. And he had any other ingredient I couldn't find, he had it there. So it was great. Then after DC, I felt like New York has to be my stop before I go back to France. And I made a stop in New York and never left. And so from that, I had the chance to work in a great restaurant called Le Cirque, when the restaurant was in transition of being famous for maybe more its clientele dining there than the food, and being famous because he was famous, but for his owner, the Sergio Maccioni, an Italian restaurateur, incredible professional. But in the kitchen, there was a big gap of direction and of focus. And so I worked there 6 years, and that helped me prove the world that I could maybe raise enough money to open my own restaurant. And 20 years ago, I opened Daniel. And so this book is, but it's about the evolution and the growth of the last 20 years as well for me. And I think we see also the evolution and the growth in America. When I arrived in New York, and I was my first executive sous chef job, Thomas Keller was my chef de partie in the Poisson. Alfred Portal was chef garde-manger, which is from Gotham Bar and Grill in New York. Bill Yosses, the pastry chef of the White House, was my garde-manger as well. And we had all kind of rock star of the moment. We were just young cook. And that was before Thomas went to France and all that. And they were like, every day we were witnessing talent coming in, talent growing in. And I went to the Plaza Athénée after, and even at Le Cirque, I have so many alumni who today are very influential chefs all over the country. But those alumni have already produced a new generation of chefs, and we see them coming now. And I think that's the exciting part, is then, of course, they learn with great chefs like me, and they understand tradition, and they try to create an evolution with that and try to be really relevant to their time. And I think for me, that's what I've tried to always do, but yet I'm still very French. I am, being in America for 30 years, you can't take the French out of me still. And it's okay, it's not a, when it comes to cooking, it's acceptable. For other things, I don't know if it's all acceptable. Especially with the politician we have right now. But, but it's about ambition. And I think it takes a lot of ambition to become a great chef. But it takes a lot of discipline, it takes a lot of hard work, it takes a lot of sacrifice. it takes a lot of motivation as well. And I think we all have our own, we can all share our own story about how to become a chef. Actually, I wrote a book called Letter to a Young Chef. And it's about how, what it took for me as a young chef to become who I am, but also what it will take you, the young chef, to eventually succeed, even if we're in a different time. I think it's a timeless lesson, I think, for what I wrote there, and it's still a lot of use by students at cooking school for being inspired, being driven, and staying, on the course, and having chosen that profession to make a difference in the future with themselves and with their teams. So the book, we have, and one word also is to, of course, every time for everyone I worked and for everything I expect from my staff, is to always exceed expectation. And I think that's something where at a certain level of perfection, you have to have everyone exceed expectation. And that's the only way those young chefs will grow to become the leaders, the one who can definitely prove that. So the book is about Daniel today, the restaurant. It's not the old story about the last 20 years. I wrote 7 other books, and they were all telling different story, but also sometimes geared more for home cooking, being more comfortable with the idea of that. And this one was more about capturing what the restaurant represents today. Many people knows Daniel, the restaurant? Yes, you have been there? Mm-hmm. So it's, I think it's one of those restaurants who, it's a grand restaurant, and it's, there's not too many in America left like that. And I think it's, I feel that it's a landmark in New York now after 20 years, starting, it's not a landmark, but it'll be one day. But at least the restaurant has sort of an era of the past and a feel of the present. And I think that's a little bit also what I do in my cooking. It's about tradition, and it's about evolution as well. And so I don't know, do you have a couple of pictures we can do? Yeah, let's do a little video of introduction. But otherwise, is there any other subject you would like me to approach for you while I am here before the video? Yes, tell me.
There was an article a couple of months ago in Vanity Fair that it was talking about the generation of chefs that you had sort of mentioned, and the idea of tasting menus versus a la carte ordering options, and how a lot of it was with tasting menus to sort of give the chef ultimate authority, make things easier, predict how much food you're going to need to order, different ingredients, and so forth. But then they were sort of saying that also it kind of lost sight of the patron as being like the ultimate boss in terms of what they want to eat. So I was just kind of curious your thoughts on how that works, and do you think one's better than the other, or your kind of philosophy?
I think no. The tasting menu and post-tasting menu work very well if you have 20, 30, 50 seats, maybe. And your goal is to try to not worry about any clientele locally, any clientele nationally. You just want to really show that there's the restaurant cooked this way and no other way. I think it's nice. For me, this is not what I do. I like I like to create a menu where there is choice. I can do 10, 12, 14 course after with the menu, but I like to offer option to the customer, and I like the customer to decide based on their budget, based on their ambition, and based on how much they want to spend or want to eat, what they would like to have. But we customize all the time things for customer. But it's true, and I went the other night to Saison, and I sit down, and I had no idea what I was going to eat, and 18 course later, it was very pleasant. So, I don't blame this formula. And maybe one day I'll open a little 25-seat restaurant and I'll do only one menu. That's the dream for a chef, actually, because you can really focus on few dishes only. But for me, I think it takes the soul of being in a restaurant, because I think in a restaurant, you go to a restaurant for an experience, but also for experiencing as many possibility as the chef has. And sometimes when you do tasting, the food cannot get the same flavor and depth than when you cook a little bite size than when you are making a real preparation, which is in a larger scale. And so, I don't know. We'll see where the future goes with the tasting menu. They'll always be there because it has been before and it will continue. But I don't think they will become the central point, because it'll become too competitive among them, and then it's expensive. It's very expensive. So if it's to go once in your lifetime, I don't know. I want you to come back once a month.
Thanks again for coming. I think this is the highlight of my year at Google in terms of people that we've hosted.
And we have scratch and sniff, so when you see the dish,
actually,
it's a new app.
It's related to the question I'm going to ask, actually. Since you're at Google, I felt like I had to ask a technology-related question. So I just wanted to get your general opinions about so-called modernist cuisine, as Nathan Meyerbold would call it. Just your impressions of that.
Nathan gave it a name, and I think it was the perfect name. And I think I have the 55-pound, maybe 60-pound book of 5-6 volume of the modernist cuisine, and I am in admiration for what he did, and the compilation he created about explaining really deeply the transformation of food and how you can also adapt something classically made and make it in a whole different way, and yet get even a better result. And I think this is fantastic. It don't always apply to the restaurant business on an everyday basis, but we do have a lot of equipment in our kitchen who will help us and will help us practice certain element of discovery in a way. Since Ferran Adrià in Spain, who was certainly the leader in this modernist cuisine, I think Nathan had the budget to be able to, and the chef won't afford. That's the thing also, is that chef has his limitation on what he can produce versus what Nathan produced. And I think it's going to become a reference for today, and is not taking anything away from the reference of the past as well. I think it's just reestablishing some solid reference for today. But do you make a better cook when you ask him to put the meat in a bag and to cook it at a certain temperature for 4 hours? Or do you make a better cook when you give him a pot and some butter and oil and to roast something by hand? You know what I mean? I think the cook of the future, they're gonna have to go back to the real cooking in order to do, because otherwise, it's terrible when a restaurant uses too much of sous vide, too much of technique, it take away the cook, because now we're under the control of electronic control of temperatures, electronic times. I mean, everything is computerized in a way that the food is basically engineered to be perfect, and that take away the art of being a great chef. That's the only thing. So anyway, let's go through the book a little bit here. So this is a snail, California snail, actually, and spring garlic soup. It's simple. It's sort of a vichyssoise of garlic with snail and a little bit of tempura of snail with a purple potato. And then this is a velouté, also of watercress, with a little crayfish timbale with a little bit of chicken liver inside, and there's the cockscomb fritter on top as well. And so that's very French in a way. The crayfish, the cockscomb, the chicken liver is very Lyonnais from where I come from. and with the watercress, who is as a warm velouté as a soup. This is a cod poached in olive oil and slow poached in olive oil, cured before, lightly cured, and then flake it and serve on a bean crushed beans with almonds formed. This is local Santa Barbara abalone, and we have a cauliflower concassé on the bottom, and we have the abalone, and it's called a little bit sort of a grenobloise garnished with the eggs and the chive, and we have the caviar with that. And so it's also made with the sake beurre blanc. Okay, let's show a little video. We entertain you in different ways this way. Okay, we have to go.
Then we have, where are we on 18? 18, I need a second course,
Everyone stop! Okay, now I think it's ready. Voilà. So that was the making a little bit of, that was the life at Daniel, the dining room, the front, the back. And you can slide, just go through the slide. I'm not connecting. But then the book I did was about Restaurant Daniel, trying to record the time now. But it was also to bring what tradition of French cuisine mean to me. And so I created a section in the book called Iconic Session. And I don't know if many of you know Bill Buford, but if you have read Eat, you know what it means. And if you have also read Among the Thug, he wrote that maybe 10 years ago. And when he was living in London, he decided to live with a hooligan for a year in order to understand, in order to make the book. And so that was the title. And he remained alive out of it. He was very lucky, despite risking his life every day. And so after that, he was, I think, in New York, and he met Mario Batali sometime late night in a bar. And then he asked if he could come and be an apprentice at Babbo. He did that, and then he felt, I got to go to Italy and cook with the Italian, because it's nice to be in New York, but I'm going to Italy. So he moved there for a year and cooked and met some amazing people to cook with there. And then after, 4 years ago, he told me, I want to move to France. I think everybody talk about the French. Everybody think they know what they're talking about, but no one really has spent time to research what's going on with the French. So he has spent 4 years in France, 4 years in Lyon, my hometown. and he has been working on a book. He's 2 years behind, but that's okay. And the book is going to come out next year, and it should be the title of is not maybe official, but right now it's Dirt. And so from heat, he had dirt now, and dirt for the terroir, of course, what dirt can bring as incredible source of supply, but also the dirt among the chefs and Lyon and French cuisine and all that. So it should be an interesting book. And so I asked Bill to come to New York and cook with me, and cook dishes who, for me, represented French cuisine through the history of my cooking. Like this dish we were doing in Lyon, it was a sole soufflé, a much smaller, and I wanted to do a turbo soufflé. So you take basically a 10-pound turbo, and you have to find a turbotière, which is this lozenge-shaped pot, which is only made for turbo, to cook a turbo. And it costs a fortune, and you can only cook turbo inside. You can cook anything you want, but it's definitely more efficient when you cook a turbo. And pardon. And this is stuff with. Can you go back? I'm sorry. So this turbo is stuffed with lobster and tomatoes and basil, and the farce is made with some lobster and turbo filet as well, and cream, and then decorated with the tomato, the zucchini and olives, and braised, and the sauce is made with the lobster heads and a classic sort of American sauce, but with a little bit more tomato. And so this was a turbo soufflé. So with Bill, I told him, I say, you're not going to be next to me with your pad. You're going to be cooking next to me your own turbo. So we both made our own turbo. And the importance also is that I was not going to give the recipe to anyone. I was just going to want Bill's words about the making of those dishes. And so sometime he writes, and then he goes into a research direction. And it's a little bit, it's incredible as a writer. I think everybody feels so captivated by by how he writes about food, and how he is taken by his mind take him in many directions. This is a jambon au foin, which is a baked ham, poached in hay, and then baked in hay again in this casserole with a lot of hay around. And then the other one is the shoulder, which is smoked in hay with all the vegetable cooking together with the shoulder, and then we smoke it inside with a smoke gun, and then close it and keep adding smoke into the hay, and smoke into the preparation. And the hay we use is the same one as the Mounted Police of New York. Horses we have the same farm, so it's good. And then we serve that. So this was the rustic French cuisine as well, the one I grew up in Lyon with. And go ahead. So this is a tête de veau en tortue. This is a classic dish who was interpreted from a recipe from Carême in the 1800s. And this is basically in the center is the head. So if you look closely, there's the nostril somewhere around here. There's two nostrils of the head and all that. So the head has been cooked for quite a long time. Then after it gets open and it gets clean, and we put back inside the sweetbread, the brain, the tongue, the cheeks, the jaw, and take the fat away and remold, and then unmold the head. We bake it, we cook it because I make a little sauce. I cook it again and then unmold it. And then I take the cooking liquid, and I create a green shell, but it's all made of herbs and cooking liquid. Then there's a pyramid of crayfish who goes on top, with cooked into a little farce of veal. And then we have quenelle with truffle. We have a little slow poached eggs with truffle. Then there's mushroom with cockscomb. Then in the front there's some tongue and brain, fried brain, and then the crayfish. And then the sauce is very spicy. It's made with veal bones, and it's very spicy, and it goes very well with it. So tête de veau en tortue, I made some when I was young, but I never made this one. And that's why I wanted Bill to feel like, whoa, I'm getting my ass kicked there with this. And so he really felt that way. And so vas-y, go ahead. And so this one, it's a chartreuse. So chartreuse in France is you take a mold or you take a moule à chartreuse actually is a mold of this shape, like that. And we do different things with it. We call it also moule à charlotte as well. And a chartreuse is, for the game birds, a chartreuse is basically a whole bird baked in cabbage. You take a pheasant or partridge and you have pieces of lard on the bottom and you can put some potatoes and then you have the braised cabbage and then you put the whole pheasant which has been pre-roasted and flambé with cognac and then you cover it with cabbage and then you bake it in the oven like that so the game birds release all its flavor. And so here I wanted to make a chartreuse like you have never seen. So first we have a young chef, Chad, who has worked on the book there and is becoming a mathematician at Columbia, but he was a chef. He went back to Columbia to be a mathematician. So I made him calculate all the carrot, turnips, and yellow carrot, and orange carrot to have the perfect field of the mold. And then after we line it up with cabbage leaves, and then we fill it up with the braised cabbage, and then this is a slice of woodcock. Woodcock had those birds' head on top of that. And so we had first a cabbage mold, molded with the lard, with the bacon, and this is got filled with crushed potato with foie gras fat, and then slice of foie gras and dove, little bird dove. So those are all wild bird in a way. And then inside is partridge, woodcock, and pheasant, 3 types of birds. And then we take the innards of the partridge, pheasant, and bécasse, and we make a little stuffed cabbage on top. And so that's a little sauvage. But I have wonderful hunters in New York, friends hunters, and so they bring me birds to New York to see, to play with that when I want to. And this is duck à la Presse. So this gentleman here has been my best customer since I opened the restaurant. For 20 years, every week he eats in the restaurant. And now he's a retired lawyer. And so now he works in the kitchen as well. During the morning, he come and spend time with the chef. And then he go home, he change, and come for dinner. And there's a whole story about the duck press in the book and how this duck press was put back to life. And with the recipe as well. We belong to somebody's in the 30s in America who was a lawyer from Cleveland who was going to the 21 Club all the time and took a duck press home and started to make all kind of recipe for his friend because he was also a hunter. And so I revived the recipe and revived the duck press 50 years later. And we have created a canard au sang, which is a classic French recipe as well. So after this session of Iconic, which there is more in the book, many more, and very interesting text, will really touch every chef. Then we have also the home section. I live right above Danielle, and so that's convenient because I am always at work and I am easily at home. And so I wanted to do home recipe, who was also approachable to people who buy this book, but felt and all the other recipe, it's a little bit overwhelming. And so I chose different region of France for that because I felt, the book is my French cuisine, and I often when I cook at home, I think of regional France. So this is about Alsace, Normandy, Provence, and Lyon, my hometown. So picture as a little mix. And Catherine, my wife, is there. Thank you. She's my partner in the kitchen upstairs. So that's the more approachable Danielle, in a way. But very expensive. If you want to eat in my home, it'll cost you more than double. Actually, I opened my home for dinner, but only for charity. I'm the co-president of City Meal on Wheel. And for City Meal, I sell dinner at home for usually 8 people, and it sells for $30,000, $40,000. So it's always a good use of my kitchen that day for a good purpose. But any question about French cuisine? Anyone? Or yes?
I have to say I'm very interested in French cuisine and equally interested in French wine. I have a trouble though when I go to a fancy restaurant. I might only bring one bottle, but have a multi-course meal with many different flavors. Sometimes you can order the tasting menus wine, but they're not usually as, let's say, high quality as the restaurant food. What would you suggest to do in this dilemma?
Well, in that case, you tell them to skip the pairing and order yourself a nice bottle. And usually, if you have 4 people, it's easy to have a bottle of white, bottle of red. If you have 2 people, it's maybe a little too much. Yeah, exactly. So I like to try a very fresh, like Pinot Noir. I mean, even American, French, or even it could be Italian also. There's some light Nebbiolo, but I note and at Daniel, for example, we purposely choose very good wine with the pairing because if we make all this effort making wonderful food and all that and not giving it the level of quality to the wine, no, absolutely. So put pressure on the chef and say, oh, I don't think your pairing is good today. But there's a new system now. I don't know if you have seen. It's something you put on the bottles. Yeah, it's fantastic because now we can open vintage wine without altering the wine and keep it over a week. And so now they can offer a glass of wine. So you can have a glass of white and a glass of red of very higher quality rather than have 3 white and 3 red. It's better to have 1 glass and follow the kind of the path of the menu with that. We are doing it at DB Bistro right now as a test, but at Daniel, we usually open and sell. But sometime in a bistro, where all the average wine is between $7 a glass to maybe $14. When you want to sell a glass at $35 or $50, then the risk of selling the whole bottle that night is more challenging.
Yes, my question is, how do you get your inspiration? Like, is it your family? You say that you wanted to be a chef when you were 12. So was it your grandmother, your mother who taught you how to cook? Is it your wife now? Is it your friends? Your friends who are cook too?
Yes.
And clients? How do you get all those ideas? And
it's Google. No, no. Actually, traveling is, of course, a big source of inspiration. And then when I think about French cuisine and I want to try to continue to explore French cuisine, then I think of home. Of course, when I think at home, for example, when we make a salad dressing, I teach Catherine how to make my grandmother's salad dressing, where you take a clove of garlic, you put salt on it, you crush it with a fork nicely until you get the little paste. Then you add up a spoon of mustard, and you add a spoon of vinegar to that, and then you pour gently the olive oil over and stir the whole thing, and then toss a nice crisp salad inside this, and serve that with a little fresh fromage blanc and some hot and spring potatoes, freshly roasted potatoes. I think it's delicious. That's my grandmother's cooking. I remember we always made soup also at home. Soups are something every night, it don't matter what it was, we made soup. But then we made weird stuff at home too. For example, we used to kill the chicken on Thursday, on Thursday we used to kill the chicken for the farmer's market, and we will keep the blood of the chicken, and on Friday we will make an omelet with the blood of the chicken, like a blood pudding of chicken blood, and slice that like an omelet, flat omelet. But it was very nutritious. When you're a kid, you need some iron, eat some chicken blood. But beside that, there is, of course, today traveling and the young chef traveling with me, the team I have. I think that's where I get the most inspiration, because they come from all over the world, some of them, and they all bring something. We sometimes sit down with them, we discuss ideas. I sit down with my chef, and we always talk about what else can we do new, different. And I have a good team of chefs, and we have a great way of communicating among each other. And I think it's, at the end, we want to make sure that the food feel right, and the food is, it's interesting. It tastes like food, and it really, for me, sometimes creativity is not always what I'm thinking first. It's more the composition of a dish. I think of the protein. I think of the what I want to marry that protein with. If it's a fish fillet of a special, I mean a particular texture, thickness, or feel, and how I want to cook it, and then from that, now how I want to season it, and what kind of acidity I want to bring around it, and what kind of contrast of texture, and all that. So it's kind of gradual build up, and we discuss that with chef. And some of the dishes make it sometime on the long run, and some dishes disappear, and we go over it and work them out again. Yep.
Hi, Chef. My question is, I really loved hearing the history of how you grew up with food and grew up on a farm, and your time in as a line chef and then moving up. And I'm really curious to hear about how you sort of moved from being an individual chef, being a sous chef, and so on, to eventually opening a restaurant. And now, obviously, you have many restaurants. How have you been able to do that successfully, to scale to many different restaurants, and what have you kind of learned from that process?
I know. I think what I've learned is to choose your partner well, and to. I was very lucky when I was looking to raise money to open my first restaurant. I was almost three-quarters there. I mean, I had maybe 1.5 million, and I needed 2.5 million. So I sit down with the gentleman, and he told me, he said, I'd rather be the one with you than one of them. And we'll do much better business together if we are just the two of us. And I think that was maybe the best day in my life, because then I found a partner who was the CEO of a very large company in America before, and he was retiring. 20 years ago, he was retiring. Now he's 81. And he didn't know what he was going to do with his retirement, and he felt, I'm not risking too much money, so I'll help that little boy there with his first restaurant. And then from that, he, of course, guided me through the business. He counted on me to take care of everything, and he counted on me to build my team to do it. But he was always a good guiding line for business. And I think trust is the most important thing in this business, because we're in a business where you could be tempted to steal from your partner. You could be tempted to steal from your business. And so it's the most important thing, I think, trust. And that's why I think 20 years later, we're still very good partner. He's not too young anymore, but I think the team I have built over the year, the CFO today is with me 20 years. The COO is with me 16 years, but he was already a cook with me 25 years ago. And then in between, he went to Cornell Hotel School, and he did hotel management and different things. And then he came back with me as director of operation, and now he's CEO. And then, director of operation has been with me for 16 years. The chef de cuisine at Daniel, 17 years. The executive chef, 17 years, Jean-François. AD, 11 years. And I have a maître d' who is in the book also with his family. And now I have the second generation, his son also has a maître d', and the two of them, father and son. And he worked with me for 30 years almost. And so it's, I think, but beside that, there's always the average age at Daniel, and the average age in the group is about, I would say, 25, 26 years old, because there's a lot of young people also.
I just want to tell you, first of all, Danielle has not only been the best dining experience, the food is phenomenal, the best I've had in the world, but also the dining experience itself is very, very special. But I wanted to ask you, so as much as I'd like to eat Danielle cuisine every day to the level that you have it, What do you eat on a regular basis for a casual day?
Today, I had wonderful vegetable. I had a salad, wonderful vegetable, the pan roast fish with fennel and resin, and the little bit of turkey. No, it was very healthy, the lunch today. And at lunch, usually I have a salad or a soup and one course. I don't eat bread so much anymore. I try to be careful because that's often the hardest thing to shed away. And I try to eat healthy. I drink a little bit of wine. I try to control what I do. And now Catherine wants to be a nutritionist. She wants to pass a master in nutrition. So very soon she'll tell me what to eat every day. But I am very concerned about nutrition, and I'm very aware that the food I make is always with the consciousness of healthiness, except like the sort of the iconic dishes where that is you get transported into another time, another world, and so you don't look at that way. But the food we do at Daniel is always with healthy component of preparation. And even if we poach the fish in butter, does not mean we're going to serve it in butter. So the butter enriched the cuisson of the fish, but still don't really affect the quantity of butter going in the dish also.
With so many different restaurants now, like all over around the world, and your name is on, I guess, all of them, right? So how do you still manage to spend time in some of the restaurants and keep your influence there? And do you find that there's, I guess, chefs that tend to stay more in the kitchen versus chefs that expand? How do you look at that?
Well, we do a Google Hangout with all the guys. And for example, I just came back from Singapore. I did a tour Hong Kong, Beijing, Singapore. I have a restaurant in Beijing and Singapore. So I go there, we discuss, I taste new things there. We do also special events, and we meet some media and have a power with the team. But I have a corporate management, and the corporate management. So either right now our CEO is in Asia, but then after that following will be a director of operation who might go. Then maybe my corporate chef. Then I'm going back in spring, I think, or after spring, and so I go about twice a year there. But every week we have a conference call via video call, and we have the team there sitting down: sommelier, manager, chef, sous chef, pastry chef, maître d'hôtel, and the key people management. And we have also the key management of the corporate group in New York. And for an hour, they have a meeting recapping on what they have done that week. In everything, in food, in wine clients, promotion, training, and all that. And then they get also some new information from that, from the headquarters. But also we designed a program where we have all the menus, all the recipe into one program, and every chef can have access to that. And so they can, Singapore can inspire himself from London chef, and the chef from London can look at what the one in New York, Boulud, what kind of new dish he did. So it stays within the DNA of Daniel, and they have the freedom to be able to also come up with ideas themselves. That's more or less the way it works. But now it's almost 1,400 people, so it's not as much as Google. But I think it's different. I think the Bay Area, I mean, you go from, of course, north of Napa and from Yountville and even Sonoma to all the way down to south of LA. I think there's an amazing collection of chefs and different styles, some of them different ambition. Of course, I mean, in New York, we have, I think, our own style of restaurant as well. Here, it's I love restaurant like Saison. Last time I went to Benu, I went to State Bird Provision. It was fantastic. I love his cooking also. Great food, tastes well, fresh, great seasoning, not too esoteric. I mean, it really tastes what it is. And I think the talent here, it's incredible. It's incredible, but it's a little bit more free-spirited than maybe in New York, where you are French or you're Italian. But the Italian restaurant I went to, SPQR, last night, it was fantastic. Also, great meal. And of course, I know Queens, also the restaurant Queens for a long time. And then there's La Folie, there's Piperade, the French chef, Hubert Keller, who I love those restaurants. But I'm not coming to see the French because I may have a drink with them, but I wanted to see what the other chefs. So I would like to go to Koi and Manresa. I missed it because of the weekend, and Manresa as well, who is really fantastic. And but there is a lot happening, and I think what I'm looking forward is to see the next generation. We're working now with those young chefs and what they're going to do themselves next. But there's definitely a concern and a return to tradition sometime. Like I see, for example, at Saison, is doing a very creative cooking, but he still have this wood fire. You need the fire to cook as well, to smoke, to flavor, to cook, and I think it's fantastic to combine the two. Thank you very much for spending time with me here.